Coaching rugby players to get the best out of them on match day is an important task at any professional team, although coaching players for their lives after rugby is perhaps even more important. Player Development Manager at Harlequins, Alun Davies, has the vital responsibility of preparing their players for a career once they retire. Alun, thank you for taking the time to speak with us at the Rugby Business Network and providing us with your expertise.
It's my pleasure.
Well, Alun, you were once involved with the Welsh Rugby Union many years ago. What were your responsibilities at the union during that time, and for how long did you work there?
Yes, I worked with the Welsh Rugby Union as their player welfare manager. Started in 2000, and I spent 11 years there. Primarily, it was initially to look after career and education development for players, but gradually, the program actually evolved to, look at personal development of all the individuals. So yes, it's still supported players who are pursuing academic and vocational qualifications outside of rugby, but then more so the personal development of coping with being an elite player, but also ultimately preparing them for the life after rugby.
It's interesting to point out that rugby is not the only sport you have been involved with after your days at the Welsh Rugby Union. You were once the Director of Sport, Health and Wellbeing at the University of South Wales, and then you took up the position of CEO at the Welsh Netball Association. How did these two roles develop you as a person?
It was, as I said, 10 years with the Welsh Rugby Union, and I've been one person who's always sort of looked at my own personal development, and a great opportunity arose at the university, as Director of Sport, Health and Wellbeing. Primarily, again, it was, managing a department of lecturers and staff, but actually looking after a lot of the Commonwealth Games athletes and regional athletes and international athletes who were pursuing academic qualification. But also one of the sports we worked very closely with in the university was netball, as well as cycling, swimming, football, rugby. But netball then were going through a bit of a change, and they are sort of professional sort of entity more than anything. And I was given the opportunity, and spent a year there as CEO, and it was great for me, so working with other sports, because I've said this all along about any type of elite athlete. They are normal people living abnormal lives, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. It is sort of such a passion for them to play the sport, but then, it's such a fickle world. 1 minute you're on a high, next minute then you may be struggling or not performing well. But the actual participation in sport is a very short part of their career. And I've always been passionate about maximising their time as athletes to prepare them for the life after the sport.
Fantastic. Well, you've been at Harlequins now for 1 year as their player development manager. Please explain what your job entails on a day-to-day basis.
Yes, I was actually made aware of the vacancy. We're only one of 3 clubs in the Premiership in England who have full-time player development managers, but we work very closely with the Rugby Players Association, who have a group of player development managers. But day to day, and it makes such a difference when there's somebody here day to day. So as players pass through or they've got a bit of downtime, they can just catch up with you and talk about anything really, which is personal, which is career, which is concerns and distractions really, because obviously while they're here as a rugby player, we want to maximise them as professional rugby players. But they've been fantastic, day in, day out. They talk about, quite a few of them are still pursuing their academic qualifications. Others are engaging with employers to explore careers outside of rugby while they're rugby players. Others obviously will get injured, when an injury happens, obviously, there's all the worries whether it's a short-term or a long-term injury. But it's all about that personal development, supporting their well-being. But as I say, maximising their time while they're a rugby player to, just go through all those open doors that are made available to them, through employers, education, and their own personal development. And, probably about 85% of the players at the moment here are engaging in something external to their rugby, which they've all said is helping them, when they come and train and perform, because they're more rounded individuals.
Absolutely. Well, Alun, we all know that a career as a professional or semi-professional rugby player has its expiry date, which is mostly undetermined for each individual. How early on in a player's career should they be making plans for their future? And how should they go about doing that when they have to fulfill these commitments, which are demanding when playing in the English Premiership?
I think you just said it there now, it's like every individual is different. The great example that's always used, when I was back at the Welsh Rugby Union, one of the players I dealt with very early on as a 17-year-old was Jamie Roberts, who had this aspiration of, wanted to maximise his rugby, but he wanted to be a doctor and study for medicine, was probably one of the hardest degrees. And the environment at the time, we're all saying there is no way he can be a rugby player and be trained or qualifying as a doctor. But obviously that was sort of put to bed quite early when Jamie sort of maximised the opportunity that was made available to him. But yes, every individual, as we say, it's every individual is different. So, for some, they like to get their study out of the way in the early part of their career. Others take sort of sabbaticals or defer a year, depending on their commitments, whether they are international players. But education and work experience is so flexible, it can be worked around their sort of, rugby commitment. They train probably, just around about the 20-hour mark every week, although they're in every day. But then they have so much downtime, really, to sort of, recover, relax after a hard session. And that's when players make their own choices, I'm happy to study and I do other things. Or in that downtime, they're meeting with employers, spending a little bit of time exploring their own career development plans, but as well as their own personal development.
Well, in all honesty, Alun, are there some players that are only interested in the here and now of their rugby playing lives and not much focus is being placed on their careers yet? Are these some of the challenges you find yourself having to deal with?
Absolutely. It's quite interesting, though, in all the environments I've been in, with Wales, with the university, with netball, and here at Harlequins. Very much, again, it comes back to that individual. Some players really do see it from early days. Great example is somebody like James Horwell here, Australian international. Very conscious that, yes, I maximise my time as a player, but every opportunity to continue to network, to think about that, time after rugby. As you said, it's like, hopefully, these players will have 12, 13, 14-year careers. But we also know through the intensity, the injuries that players get, it can be taken away from them quite quickly. For me, it's capturing the players who want to engage now, but not ignoring the players who, put a few things on the back burner, but then you support them during those, low times when they are injured or they come into the end of their retirement. And I think that sort of support network, rather than, you lose a player 1 minute, they finish playing and then disappear into the sunset and you hear the bad stories afterwards. I think what Harlequins have got is a genuine sort of well-being and care for all players, whether it's an academy player or a senior player, to really look after them while they're playing, but at the same time to keep making them aware of the need for them to take that sort of self-managing approach for their own careers. Because as a rugby player, and I'm sure this happens in most sports, everything is laid for them on the table. Awful to say, but it's like, their food, their schedule, their conditioning, it's a schedule. It's very much, similar to maybe in the military or, where they train to do a job, but then when that's taken away from them and they need to be self-managing, some players do struggle. But the more we can educate them and more we can show them that, there is sort of much more outside of rugby. But the emphasis for me, again, is coming back to, maximising their time while they're rugby players. The network they have, the support they have. The employers that are linked to Harlequins, it's so diverse, so they can access anything that they show an interest in. And to date, as I say, with sort of 85% of players engaging, it shows that, yes, they're aware and they need to be doing, whether it's an academic qualification, a trade, some players are doing carpentry or, working in the retail trade or becoming a gym instructor. They're doing that while they're playing rugby, knowing that they've added skills. Nobody likes the word retirement, and nobody thinks about that. But it's that support that we provide them to make them ensure that they get maximise their opportunities. And the big one for me as well is that even when we know they are fully focused on their rugby, we need to eliminate the distractions off the field so that they can concentrate on their rugby when they perform.
Many, many interesting points raised there, Alan. What process do you and each player go through from the start in determining what career best suits them all the way through to transitioning into that chosen profession?
Yeah, again, it's different with each player. My initial sort of remit is more, if you want to put it that way, is just to build a rapport with the players, getting to know them. Because some of the players have got some interesting ideas. I think it's a perception. I think that most rugby players become rugby coaches. We've got sort of good half a dozen. Nick Evans was a good example last year, Adam Jones and a couple of other players. But other players, their interests lie in things outside of rugby, but using the rugby network, whether it's in running their own business, whether teaching, engineering, information technology, finance, properties, all those things. They have an interest, and it's an opportunity to explore. But we do use a lot of sort of, one-to-one assessments and looking at their personal aptitudes, a couple of psychometric testing, just to make sure that they do have certain skills to meet that industry. And if they don't, we tell them not to worry, because, again, they can maximise the time and build on those skills and develop new skills to prepare them for going into a different industry as well.
Well, you mentioned it earlier, saying that work experience opportunities, they're incredibly important in making that transition after rugby as smooth as possible. Which businesses and companies have Harlequins teamed up with to assist the players?
We've been very fortunate, and this is one probably the big difference, I think, coming from the Welsh Rallies coming up to London. But, the network of support that we've had here, not only from our key partners, people like DHL, IG, Adidas, those big companies who are our key sponsors. And they've been fantastic, just opening the doors to players. But also local companies, people who are passionate Harlequins fans, have really bought into that sort of awareness that these players are people, that they are human beings with obviously great rugby skills, but an interest in other fields. But we've linked up with big retail companies like Sainsbury's, the local fire service, air traffic control at Heathrow, several schools. Those sort of, whatever a player's got an interest with, there's no doubt that we have a network here that we can tap into those organisations.
That's amazing. Well, from all those job opportunities and experiences you have mentioned, what jobs do you find are often best suited for rugby players based on the skills and unique traits that they possess?
We've done this very regularly, and even back in Wales when I was working back there, it's like just identifying these transferability skills. Players hear about it, but they don't actually recognise it as a rugby player. But when you sit down with them and you look at their organisational skills, their decision-making skills, their working under pressure, and that can be transferred into so many different businesses, whether it is sort of like commercial businesses of sales and sponsorship and marketing, but also in things like teaching, working in services like the fire service and the police. The transferability skills can go across to so many of the industries that these players want to take an interest in.
Most definitely. How reliant are you on player associations and programs like the Life After Rugby program, which operates through the Rugby Business Network, when it comes to assisting players with their career transition?
Coming into this role with Harlequins, very aware that the RPA are doing a fantastic job, and I very much know the International Rugby Players Association as well across the globally are now more aware of the need, not just for looking after a player while they're a player, but it's all those distractions that players have, the personal development that they require, but also that sort of key element of that life after sport. And as I say, I very much work closely with Damien Hopley's team and Ben McGregor, who's attached to Harlequins. Not sort of stepping on anybody's toes. We're really working together on developing all the essential needs that these players require while they're playing, and all the pressures that they put under from, the finances side of things and agents and contracts, but also then in those day-to-day life skills. And we work very closely with the association.
That's great to hear. Well, lastly, Alan, if there is one piece of advice you would urge all professional rugby players to take to heart, what would it be?
It's very privileged coming into a professional sporting environment, because obviously somebody has recognised their competence as an athlete, as a player. Absolutely maximise the time while they're a player, whether it's for 2 or 3 years or whether it's a long career of 15, 16 years. Because obviously, nothing will ever replace, the thrill of playing rugby and the enjoyment they get out of it, and come to work really and enjoy, every day in work. And we've got a bit of a motto here in Harlequins in personal development, where it's about choosing your attitude. So it's coming to work, choosing your attitude to enjoy, maximising your time. And actually, as we say, maximise your time as a player to prepare for your life after your playing days.
Well, Alan, some fantastic advice to end off our conversation. Without a doubt, player development and preparing for a career after rugby is extremely necessary. We at the Rugby Business Network urge you to keep up the incredibly important work you do at Harlequins.
Thank you very much indeed.